There are many things that the government is trying to achieve with the reform.
Adedeji Dayo is a partner in KPMG.
Because you operate informally doesn't mean you don't have any tax obligation.
Better for you to be aware than to be it. What is the number one true measure of an efficient tax system?
Reasons, because one, we have a lot of businesses that operate informally.
So good day, everyone. Welcome again to the Pivot Point podcast. Today we have an interesting topic and an interesting guest in the house. First, the saying goes that two things are certain in life, taxes and debt. I'm very happy that we are not talking about debt today. We are talking only about taxes. And with me today, I have Dayo Adedeji. Dayo is a partner in KPMG. And he has a big experience on the subject matter. Of course, we are talking about the tax reform proposed in Nigeria. Waiting is cooked already, waiting to be served hopefully early next year. And it's my extreme pleasure to welcome Dayo on the show with us today. Welcome, Dayo.
Thank you very much, Samuel. I'm very happy to be here and very happy to be talking about this subject. Tax, as you know, some people find tax very boring, but
yes.
And of course, people also don't like to pay tax. But
Yes.
for me, doing this for many years, I find that there are many interesting aspects of tax. And it's always good to be aware because you don't want to be hit or slammed by, a huge tax liability. So I think it's very important to, continually talk about this subject and continually talk to people about the subject. So
I think it's relatable when you say people don't want to talk about tax because people don't want to have anything to do with it. Yet, what you said is very powerful. Better for you to be aware than to be it.
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
Better to be aware.
That's interesting.
I think another reason why people the subject is very, some people don't, get upset about, tax discussions is because also of the trust issue. Between the taxpayers and the government.
Yeah.
Because usually there is a social contract, you pay your taxes, you see what the government does with the tax collected. But sometimes that seems not to be the case.
Yeah.
However, there's been talks of Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio, which is kind of low.
Okay.
It's gone up a bit now, but it's still low if you compare it to the average in Africa and other developing countries. So there is a drive to, in a sense, elevate tax compliance.
Yeah.
But the question is, which comes first? Should I comply first, or should government show workings? Can
build the trust?
Can they build the
trust? Can you work on the trust a little bit, or I need to comply more?
Absolutely.
And then we need to find the right balance.
Absolutely. So that's another reason.
So when we come, the way I like to look at law, I look at the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. And I like how you start the conversation. Now, when it comes to the tax conversation, what is the spirit of this tax reform? What is the government trying to do?
Well, there are many things that the government is trying to achieve with the reform. But the main things I would say would be, one, to harmonize the different pieces of legislation. So until now, you have different pieces of legislation for that governs our taxes.
Yeah.
So whether it's companies tax, value-added tax, capital gains tax, personal income tax, like different taxes, different pieces of legislation. There are also some taxes that you pay that's, I'm not even sure if they have their own legislation. Well, there must be a basis, but like when I'm talking about things around police levy, tax,
Educational levies.
tertiary education levy.
They are not
So
legislated.
I believe there must be legislation. We don't. I don't. We don't really make reference when you provide advice to clients. They are not the main pieces of legislation. Let me put it that way. But definitely there must be
Some backing.
There must be backing. You can't just levy people. So there must be a piece of legislation, but they're not the main ones. So the main ones are the ones I just mentioned. But because we don't have all these small pieces also, there's the Naseni levy, there's NIDA levy. So government is looking, why have all these pieces of legislation? Can we
bring them under the same uniform?
Them together? Let's have one, tax framework.
Which in a view is very good.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You deal with one source of truth when it comes to tax matters.
Absolutely. Because, we've had instances where there might be a bit of conflict. So maybe one tax law says this, but the other tax law seems to suggest something else. So there was something, I'm thinking of an example, say for, I believe it was VAT or CIT, I'm not sure, says, you must pay your tax in the currency of the transaction, but another law is silent on it. So the question is, if I had a transaction in USD, for instance, I want to pay my tax because this legislation says pay in the currency of transaction. But hey, I actually have Naira, I want to pay. But the other law kind of permits me, or is silent, doesn't say anything on that. What should I, how do I deal with that?
A bit of digression. Is that intentional? Because when there's confusion, somebody's making money.
Well, I don't think it's intentional. I think it's probably an omission because some of these pieces of legislation are drafted at different times, and also amendments are made at different
with different
times.
spirit, with different objectives,
and all that.
different
So,
sources.
and again, looking at the situation in Nigeria, especially in the past recent years where we've had FX issues, why would you want to insist on? I mean, sometimes some of these provisions defy logic. That's what I'm trying to say. So if I want to pay, I actually want to pay my money. I mean, my taxes. But do you then insist on collecting, the foreign FX
instead of the local
So,
currency?
I digress. So, one of the, you see, once we have this conversation, you tend to digress in many directions. But one of the reasons is to harmonize the various pieces of legislation to, in a sense, make provision for the less privileged or in a sense, because now small businesses are, there've been a finance act to, in a sense, exempt small companies, but the threshold has now been increased. So if your turnover in a year is less than 100 million, no tax, no VAT also. If you earn around the minimum wage,
800,000
per annum and below,
gross.
there is no. So Sam, you've actually read or bits and pieces
We
of
are all part of the party. When it comes to tax, nobody is exempted.
Exactly.
That's why I tell you from debt and tax.
Exactly.
and I like how you start. You say better to know the rules so you don't get it.
Absolutely.
So there are some basic rules, things I consider. I mean, our education is not complete until you help yourself.
Yeah.
And things like tax, things like law, social
very
contract.
important,
There are things that you need to be aware of.
Absolutely.
And when you are not aware of them, sometimes you are losing when you don't even know that you are losing.
Absolutely.
So I always encourage everyone to stay updated with tax, with law, and many other subjects like that. And that's why I always interest me in subjects like that. But one question hits me when it comes to Nigeria, because you said something very profound. Our tax remit compared to GDP ratio, compared to other African countries, is very low.
Yeah.
Is this due to compliance or leakages?
I think a bit of both, because voluntary compliance is not high. People comply, no doubt, or let me say corporates. More of the corporates comply, but there are many companies that also do not comply. Reasons, because one, we have a lot of businesses that operate informally.
Yes.
Because you operate informally doesn't mean you don't have any tax obligation. But some people, either because they don't know or they don't feel the need because it's informal, they are selling on Instagram or they're selling on one website, they don't have that corporate, entity. Nobody comes to knock on their doors. They don't feel the need to comply, especially because nobody comes to ask them. I feel like if there's an aggregation of all those kind of informal businesses or those people that operate in that manner, you can imagine what the taxes would be if you were to determine what tax on their profits will be. So there is that, but there's also leakages, because we know how some of the tax authorities operate, and I mean, not to indict anyone, but we do know that sometimes there are some underhand dealings. Sometimes there've also been talks of government also giving away a lot in terms of incentives.
Tax breaks?
Yeah, tax breaks. So that some of these incentives are not necessarily
needed.
They're not needed.
There are not economic values to justify why you have a tax break.
So, so that's can be a leakage, even though I also feel a way to motivate investment can also be
Investment, yeah,
through
jobs.
incentives. So, but I think at the end of the day, you have to evaluate,
Yeah, decisions.
and usually for the pioneer, the tax holiday
Yes.
scheme that we
Yes.
have in Nigeria, usually it should usually go through the process
Yeah.
of justifying how many jobs are you creating, what would be like the level of tax that you'll be paying by the time the tax holiday is
Economic
over,
impact.
all those kind of
What
things.
you're gonna get.
Those kind of things are checked. I mean, for the ones that do come to like the big fours where we help them to do that, those things are checked. But that is not to say that in all instances, or there haven't been people that have gotten those breaks or holidays
Easily.
without necessarily going through that process of justifying
Diligence.
that diligence, justifying the economic value, the employment you're creating, and those kind of things before they ultimately get those breaks. So yes, so from that perspective, I would say yes, there are leakages. So it's a bit of both. I would say compliance
And leakages.
and leakages.
Let me go back to the area of compliance, because you mentioned something also that is in the reform, which is the virtual asset. And you mentioned when people have brand equities. We are aware of intangibles
Yeah,
when it
intangible
comes to the
assets.
P&L.
Yeah.
These virtual assets, are they the same as intangibles?
When you say virtual assets, I think the reference to virtual assets in the new legislation really
Yeah.
is looking at like all these digital currencies,
Oh,
the cryptos, and things.
okay.
So in the past, so intangibles, there's always been some kind of recognition. for
Like brand name.
intangibles.
You have a brand name.
Brand
you have
name,
a household name.
goodwill.
Goodwill, exactly.
know,
Those are intangibles.
Those are intangibles. Yeah, they're not. So even though goodwill usually not impacts your profit or loss, it will be usually in your balance sheet or what. There's a new name for balance sheet these days. I think statement of your financial position. Anyways,
Yes,
it's
yes.
I did my professional exams in the
Okay.
olden days.
Okay.
We used to call it balance sheet at the
Yeah.
time. So
I think most people still do call it balance
oh
sheet.
yeah, that's like
Because that's how you easily connect to
yeah,
it.
that's how you can really
Yeah, but those intangibles are not in the P&L. Obviously, they are sitting
yeah,
in the
so
balance
yeah,
sheet.
that's in the
So they are
balance
not
sheet. So
taxable.
there's no real Of course, there are also some things that are like software, intangible assets. But because you've spent a lot of money
To acquire them,
to acquire them,
depreciation.
you have to exactly. So that's where it impacts P&L,
Yes.
and that's where it impacts tax. So that's always been there because people have always used software anyways.
Yes.
Right. What they're trying to then introduce now is virtual currencies, the
Currencies.
cryptos and all, because
Okay.
there is a lot of money that people make a lot of
It's
money
growing.
in that regard.
The
and it's
base is growing over
So
there.
There needs to be some kind of legislation to subject that to tax because if it's not there, so people will then see it as a loophole. Say, well, what's the basis if you're seeking to subject a gain that I've made on this virtual assets? Because people can make capital gains on it.
Yes.
What will be the basis for you to subject it to? Then, yeah, there might be things that might, that the tax authority might want to rely on, but for clarity, it's now been included in the tax
And at the
framework.
beginning, when I saw the virtual asset, I was thinking like you have a TikTok brand or something that is social equity. You have a TikTok channel, you create music,
Yeah.
and then you make money out of it.
Yeah.
And initially, I thought this is what the government was trying to tax.
No, it's really those digital currency and those things. That's what they're looking, because if you had the brand equity or brand name and you make you make money from it, then the natural thing is to look at the funds flow
Yes,
and then subject that to tax.
to tax.
You wouldn't tax the brand name in itself
No.
because it's the brand that creates
You tax the revenue.
you tax the
created by
revenue
brand.
created by the brand
Yeah.
essentially.
And you
Yeah.
depreciate the brand if you can.
If you are depreciating
If
the
you are
brand,
depreciating the brand,
you
yeah.
know. So even there, so depreciation is accounting. Then you have to then see what is the tax, because capital allowance is what we call like tax depreciation. So because your normal accounting depreciation would not be allowed on the
Yeah.
tax side, we
Of
usually
course.
disallow it, and we allow using the tax basis
Of course.
to allow to subject some of that, to give you an allowance for in lieu of the depreciation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but of course, if you sell your brand or you sell an intangible assets, of course, you might want to evaluate whether there has been a capital gain
in the
otherwise. But
process.
of course, that's
There will
until
be something.
yeah, but that's until maybe you sell,
You sell,
make a
you
disposal or
cash,
something.
you cash in on it. If you
absolutely.
don't cash in on it, you can keep
Yeah.
it for as long as you want.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to the street.
Yeah.
Because one of the big topics on my mind related to this tax reform is the small sized businesses and the low earners.
Yeah.
And then you said they have some exemption in the tax. But the reality in the last 2 years is they have also been hit. They've taken incremental cost, rising cost of doing businesses,
Okay.
fuel subsidy removal.
Okay.
It is like a give and take transaction happening over there. I take so much from you. Now let me give you a little bit. Or how do you see that?
Well, I don't necessarily. I think there's a correlation.
Yep.
To be frank, but maybe it's not. The correlation is not direct in that sense.
Definitely.
The reason is because even before subsidy removal, there have been series of finance acts. In I believe the first series started in 2019 or 2020
Okay.
thereabouts, where there have been some modifications to the tax legislation. And in those finance acts, there were exemptions for small companies, even though the threshold at the time was
much
25,
lower.
yeah, 25 million.
Okay.
Now, okay, and then they try to categorize companies also into medium. So I think above 25 but less than 100 medium, then your tax will be at 20%. And that was before, subsidy removal allowance. So I know the direction had been to try to align with global,
Standard.
best practices, and which is one of the things that the tax reform, I didn't mention when I was talking about some of the things that the tax reform was hoping to achieve. So to that extent, I would say, there was already the direction of play was already
Towards
towards,
that place.
aligning with, some global best practice. Notwithstanding, with inflationary pressure, subsidy removal,
Cost
and
of doing
all the
business.
I think it was very clear that the threshold needed to be enhanced.
Yeah.
So 100 million, I mean, if you calculate that in dollars or even without necessarily looking at the USD, is relatively, upcoming business, or a small business. There are many small businesses would have exceeded the previous threshold.
Yes,
the
easily.
25 million easily.
Yes.
So there was clearly a need to expand that threshold. I think it's also a way to, in a sense, try to ease, the pressure of, small businesses and also individuals. So if you look at the threshold for the personal income tax for individuals, if you're earning minimum wage, I mean, you're already
At the base
fully
of the
paid. So
at the base of the
yeah,
pyramid.
so I think it's just fair to just, give them a break, and like the president famously said, let the poor breathe. I think it's like a way of, letting people that don't earn so much just have a bit of a breather.
So they have zero tax return.
Yeah.
Zero tax payment.
Zero. Even though we also even did an analysis, and I think I'd done the analysis here. If you're earning anything around 15 million, with your basic housing, transport being around 10 million, under the new framework, you're going to be paying slightly lower tax.
Than you were before.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Because even the band has changed.
Changed, yes.
Yeah. But I think I don't know if that's the cutoff, but under the analysis that I had prepared,
Yes.
from around 60 million
Yes.
per annum,
Yes.
with your basic housing being around if I look at your basic salary, housing. Transport being around 40 million, you're going to be paying higher, at least about almost 2 million more in taxes.
Than you were paying.
So in a sense, it's a way of saying, you know what, maybe the people that don't earn so much pay less or don't pay. Well, don't pay for the ones 800 and below. And the ones that even earn more than that, but, not up to maybe about 15 million thereabout, maybe they should pay a bit less. But for those that earn much more, pay a bit more. So in a sense, it's trying to enhance fairness. sort of, because part of the canons of taxation also is fairness.
It's fairness.
Yeah.
And trust me, like more than a couple of questions popped up in my mind as you described that scenario,
Sure.
which is coming at all of us. But when you talk about fairness, and we started from the conversation of trust,
Yeah.
how do you put the lack of trust,
Yeah.
which is driving non-compliance, and fairness on the same table?
Well, I mean, if you ask me, I think that's a tough one. But fairness in the sense that because you want people that have the ability to pay more, and the people with less ability to pay less. From that point of view, it seems fair.
Yes, it makes common sense.
It makes common sense, logical. But I think the trust issue is then, what does the government then do with this, tax collection? If you've looked at the collection in the last few years, it's grown.
It's grown.
I think recently, I wish I had noted it on my device here.
Yeah.
Or maybe before we finish, I can do a quick search.
Yeah.
I think it's about 14 trillion.
14 trillion.
If not more, that the FRS had collected. That's significant. I recall there was a year they collected about maybe 6 trillion or 7 trillion. It was massive. It was celebrated. I think that was
at the 6 million, at 6
at the
trillion
6 trillion level.
Now
it
they are
was
reaching 14.
so now it's about maybe 14 or more. And the question is, do people feel the impacts of this huge collection?
Trust.
And that's where the trust issue comes
Absolutely.
in. I think part of what has also enhanced their collection is also the devaluation, by the way, because government also gets...
I'm coming to the big question.
Government
on that.
also gets some tax revenue in FX. So ultimately, by the time you look at you do the conversion at,
It's a
at
big
the new
leverage
rate,
for the government.
It's bigger, but notwithstanding, compliance and collection has really, really increased.
Yes.
And part of the things driving that is that, and then also a lot of companies providing services into Nigeria now having to pay taxes, because we have this significant economic presence order that was also enacted. And those guys, because also they're global players, they want to be compliant. So if your law says, I meet this threshold, I provide this service, I pay tax, they're very happy to pay. So that has also increased the tax collections on the government side. But I mean, just to answer your question, to circle back to your question, it's really, people see all these numbers, 14 trillion, 15 trillion, but
I don't feel it.
I don't really,
I don't feel it. Yes,
So
this is where the trust
that's
issue
the
that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
Definitely, on the table.
And by the way, I wrote an article on that subject some years back. Maybe I'll share with you.
Okay.
I forget the topic now, but really about this whole trust thing. But the question is, it's the law. You have to comply as a law-abiding citizen. If the tax law says you have to, pay X amount of tax, you should pay. But there's also this trust deficit. So government, all its part, also has to do its own bit. But which one comes first? So it's kind of like a chicken and eggs situation, because people don't want to comply because I don't see what you're doing with it.
Yes.
But government also is saying, look, I need the money to provide amenities to you. I need you to pay your taxes to perform my own responsibility. So which one comes first?
It's chicken and egg. But if you ask me, you need to build a trust, because the lack of trust will drive other behaviors, avoidances, leakages, and all of that. And you mentioned there are so many informal businesses.
Yeah.
It is a form of avoidance as well. People are not naive, or they may appear naive, but in the real sense, they are smart.
Maybe that's evasion, because avoidance is lawful.
Avoidance is lawful within
avoidance
the law.
is
Evasion,
when
yes,
you-
you're
yeah,
right.
yeah,
You
avoidance
find
is-
the lacuna
loophole
within the law. Yeah, absolutely. Now, this 100 million we spoke about for small businesses, is it an incentive not to grow?
No, not at all.
So when I reach,
But
if I have a
again-
business that is 95 million turnover last
Then
year,
you want to stay there.
and I can reach 120 this year, what should I do? Because
No.
the gap,
Yeah.
and this happens on personal level as well, because the band also have an impact. And
Yeah.
usually when people get, in other advanced countries in Europe, in America, before you get a big salary increase, you negotiate with your manager. Do I really need the salary increase, or You can hold your salary increase, and I'm better off without it. And when the next one comes, maybe you can accumulate it. Is it going to happen also for the small businesses?
Well, I think the the incentive is not to discourage growth.
Of course.
I think businesses should want to grow. It's just to make things easy for businesses. But also, even though you don't have a tax obligation to pay, government also wants to, in a sense, because you still have filing requirements.
You have to file, of course.
So they just also want to monitor so that once you then grow and you're now big, they can then say, hey, we were with you throughout when you were growing. Now you are, of course, it's threshold.
Which is fair.
So,
Which is fair, but
but the plan. So what you're saying is more around planning, tax planning, what we call tax planning in our field. To say, look, if I'm going to hit this threshold, this is the impact. So am I better off just managing it? So and I think those conversations are conversations that management of companies or as individuals would have to evaluate to say, look,
absolutely,
do I want to manage? But do you really control your turnover? It's based on your sale, right? So do you then say, oh, well, I don't want to sell anymore? As long as you're not, in a sense, managing your records. If it's that you want to, maybe once you hit a threshold, you close shop.
For the year.
For the year.
I'm done. See you next year.
And defer your sale till the next year. I mean, perhaps that's planning. And that's not unlawful.
Yes, it is.
But I don't think the intention is. I mean, the intention on the government side is not to, have people do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's more of, individuals or businesses planning their affairs. And I mean, we do that a lot. Even I was advising the client, and there was conversation around, they were going to do some transfer of shares. As you know, transfer of shares used to be exempt from capital gains, but now there's capital gains. So there is, okay, that's what value do we transfer? I mean, it's just between us. Do we just do it at nominal value, or should it be market value? If we do it at nominal value, there would be conversation around transfer pricing related. So will two unrelated parties transact in this manner? So the tax authority can hold you on that ground.
Spot that.
So you then need to then say, okay, can I get a third party that will do some kind of valuation for you? But of course, you want the valuation to still be, something reasonable. So those kind of just to buttress that, those kind of conversations do happen. But that's from a planning perspective. But government cannot say, oh, I don't want companies to grow. I mean, as a business, you also don't want to stay within,
you
that
want
league.
To grow.
You want to play in the big league. So ultimately you would have to grow at some point.
Absolutely. And the example you gave is very good, because then when it comes to transfer of shares, as an example, now it's termed as capital gain, and you have to pay tax. This was part of the big leakages, and I know other countries are not in this stage yet. They are still allowing share transfer to come basically as asset, not as cash in. Now, is there a way to get out of this, to play the game and kind of avoid this capital gain tax?
Well, for shares, there's a history to it. And the history is that, at the time when we're trying to develop our capital markets, to encourage, capital markets transactions, government decided to exempt transfer of shares, sale of shares from tax entirely. But the position of the government now is that our capital market has matured.
Has matured, yeah.
Is now a mature market. I can't remember what the there's a way they measure capitalization. It's really grown. It's matured. So the aim has been achieved. So now we can now begin to start taxing it.
Yeah.
So but I on a personal level, I think it's just a way of seeing, other areas that government can also make money, if you ask me, because
I believe so.
Why are we not taxing this? If we can tax this, we can make more money. So
yes.
From their own perspective, I think that's it. What they've then done is to have a threshold, which I think is not, I think it's small, if you ask me. So if you're doing a transfer and the proceeds from the transfer is 100 million or below, then you're exempt from capital gains on shares.
Yes.
that threshold has been increased in the new tax act
Tax
now,
reform, yeah.
to tax reform, new Nigeria Tax Act to 150 million.
Okay.
150 million, and then the gain, if the gain is not more than 10 million, so it's like a two-factor test.
Yes.
150 million, then
And 10 million gain.
10 million gain.
Then-
150 proceeds, so the value of the shares itself that you're disposing, 150 times the gain. Then anything below that, exempt. So again, to your question is to say, okay, can we be within this within this bracket?
Because
Or-
I can have a share worth 1.5 billion. I can choose to sell it at
Yeah.
different transactions.
Yeah, but the truth is, if your share is worth 1.5 billion,
billion, yes.
Okay, so you want to sell,
I want to sell 1.5
Yeah,
billion, so I'm going to sell 140 now.
later. Yeah, but that will take you some time.
Yeah.
Because what it says is that threshold is within a 12 months, consecutive 12 months period. So
Yes.
it's like looking at a year.
Yes.
So if you're going to sell, if you want to be within that threshold, then it might take you like 10 years.
Yeah. You talked about tax planning. You talk about tax
Yeah,
planning. You
yeah.
know, I read an article a long time ago that it buttresses the level people will go for tax.
For tax, yeah.
And I think you know as well.
Oh,
for
yeah,
tax
absolutely.
avoidances.
Absolutely.
There was this article about in the UK about window frames with bricks. And the historians decided to talk about why you have window frames on High Street with bricks. And they went back to the mid 19th century. And the reality was that the government tried in the UK to pass a tax that if you have more than 7 windows in your house, which was an indication of affluence, you're going to pay higher band of tax. So people that have like 9, 10 windows in their front, they said, okay, I'm going to close this, I'm going to close that. And they avoided the tax. And just imagine how far people will go to avoid. So when you are saying this,
Absolutely.
I'm saying,
Yeah.
Personally, from my experience, I will never underestimate
how far
anyone
people can go.
or any organization, how far people can go in avoiding, and that's why I said that.
Absolutely.
But I want to go back to the street. This transaction we spoke about,
Yeah.
rising cost of doing business, subsidy removal,
Yeah.
and now it seems the government is giving something back. This was the spirit of the tax reform, or under the spirit of the tax reform. Is this real or imaginary? Why am I saying that? The 25 million turnover threshold for tax exemption is now 100 million. But that 25 million was 4-5 years ago when the dollar was at a different rate. The reality, the value of the dollar or the value of the naira has depreciated more than 4 times.
Absolutely.
So 100 million today is
potentially
25 million. So are we getting anything back in reality, or this is just, coloring old walls?
Well, I would say there's still something that we're getting back. And the reason is because even though it's really an import economy, so a lot of things that you import will still have, there's still that dollar
tax,
that dollar impact.
And
But if we look at it truly, and I don't know, I believe the chairman of the fiscal tax reform, I know he likes to use a lot of data.
Yeah.
Taiwo, he was my lecturer by the way, when I was doing my professional exams.
Yes.
He used to lecture. So I know he used a lot of data. So I imagine that there would have been some study to see at what point do we want to exempt people. I think that as we begin to implement the new framework, those things will be looked at to say, look, is it really giving the kind of impact that we want, or do we need to, in a sense, increase or decrease? So I think those things happen. I know in the UK, for instance, they're constantly, every year, there's usually some adjustment to the tax laws. So I think that's the way I see it. I know that it might seem like it's not a lot given what has happened, and so I get your point to say, look, a lot has happened since then. We've had this devaluation, inflation has gone up.
Subsidy removal.
Even though the intention is also that these things would be managed properly. I mean, as you can see, inflation is now trending downwards in Nigeria.
In Nigeria and most African countries.
Yeah. For the FX, it's also going down, even though I don't know how far it will go, considering how how wide it was. I mean, it's Naira probably lost about 400% thereabouts. So the gain that we see now, for me, it's not
It's the
significant.
icing, the cake is. We
It's
are
not,
touching only the icing.
yeah,
yet.
it's not material. So I think one should begin to implement this first, and then over time it can be looked at and reevaluated, and ultimately come to a point where we can then begin to evaluate if it's having the impact that we want. The people that we want to get the benefits, are they getting the benefits? So I think there's still the opportunity to relook the legislation, and then try to ensure that it's meeting the expectation of the the people that are doing the.
I'll try to be a bit more provocative. The body language is good from the government, but there's nothing still technically in the pocket of the people. Because if what you said is correct,
Yep.
the government is taking more, especially from subsidy, which was the biggest loss for the pocket. For the pocket. If you talk about the size
So
of
in a
the
sense,
pocket,
yeah, in a sense,
the
people were
biggest
getting
impact on the
benefits.
pocket is not inflation. I mean, inflation is there, but the subsidy removal, which impacts all other industries, everybody, because we run on
transports,
everything. We run on diesel, we run on fuel.
yeah.
There's a big takeaway from the pocket over there. And now there's a good body language with the tax reform for low earners and for small businesses. But there's still nothing in the pocket. Just a good dance, but there's still nothing big in it. Is this going to impact social trust in the long run?
Well, I think we would have to see. I can't really say or answer one way or the other. I think we would have to see what are some of the things that on the government side they are doing, and whether those things have positive impacts on people. I would have to agree with you that there has been the inflation, the subsidy thing has really, really impacted people. It has increased poverty. I was reading some reports, and I was reading how poverty has the poverty gap has widened.
Yeah.
However, and I may not being a spokesperson for the government, but I know there are also efforts to try to do some things like the funding thing for education, the NEL fund.
Yes.
There's also the credit scheme that the government is coming up with. I know the one to address poverty, the conditional cash transfer thing was halted because of the issue with the minister in charge. So I know that there are efforts to try to address some of these gaps, but whether those efforts are sufficient, I would say personally, maybe not at this time, but it's an ongoing reform. It's an ongoing effort. So perhaps maybe give it another year, and one can reassess and see whether some of those efforts have yielded the kind of results that are intended. But I'll have to agree that at this time, maybe not yet. It might seem that the net effect is still negative, because if you look at what you're giving back, which is the point you're trying to make, compared to
what
the
you've taken
impact
from my pocket,
from the subsidy and what have you, it might.
I mean, for sure, we are not writing off the reform. There are big advantages. There are
Sure.
big steps that the government is making for sure. For the low income earners not to pay tax is a big steps.
Sure.
And there's another part of the reform which is for new businesses. I think 4 to 6 years, they are not going to pay tax until they reach some level of income. As an example, I don't know if you connect to that, but also we are not in any way dismissing the benefit. We are just saying if this is a transaction, am I giving more as a guy on the street
Understand.
or as a entrepreneur than what I'm taking, and
Sure.
how that connects with the social trust
Sure.
that we spoke about.
Sure.
But definitely we are still a long way ahead, and I like what you said. Like in other countries, this is being reviewed almost every year, and the same mindset helps a lot, because then we are adjusting with time, with the season, with behaviors, with the realities.
Inflation, you say, okay, what's inflation saying? Okay, where do we put more? Who do we give more? Those kind of things. Those kind of things are, what we expect that, are being looked at and reviewed constantly. There are also some good parts also in the law. I mean, in the the new act around like VAT, where
Yes.
in the past, your input VAT was only restricted to goods that have been purchased for resale,
Yeah.
or goods that form stock in trade that you use in producing another product
End product
on which VAT is charged.
charged. Yeah.
Now it's now been expanded, to even include, all VAT that you incur.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can then recover your VAT. I mean, the scope for you to recover VAT that you incur it's now wider.
So let's break it down. I'm a chef.
Okay.
I buy vegetables and meat,
Yep.
and I buy some soft drinks. I pay VAT at the purchase.
Yeah.
When I make the meal, final meal, I charge my consumer VAT and I deduct all the input
Yes.
VAT from it.
Yes.
This is allowable.
Yes.
Net allowing me to pay less tax.
Well, the tax is not yours in the first place, anyways. But yes, technically,
Allowing the consumer to pay less tax.
no. Allowing because the consumer bears the VAT.
Yes.
But you also have borne some VAT
In my input
so,
cost.
In your inputs, yeah.
Yes.
So in the past, it was only the VAT that you incur in producing a new product that used to
is
be allowable, or a
to-
good
for
that
deduction.
you bought that you're reselling.
Yes.
But now
Everything.
Everything.
So it's a breather for me as an
Exactly.
entrepreneur or
Exactly.
as a conglomerate, as a
Exactly.
multinational business.
Exactly.
As an example, which is
Exactly.
very good.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the good part as well.
Absolutely.
And this helps compliance.
It's good. However, I think it might have an impact on VAT that government collects. So I'm not quite sure how they seek to plug that hole.
And what do you mean? Lower VAT collection from
That's-
the government?
that's-
yes, because
that's
if I
yeah.
get a breather,
Yeah.
then somebody's paying for it. In this case, it's the government.
Exactly. That's my own estimates. So now whether there are ways or plans to plug the hole elsewhere, maybe the CGT, perhaps, I don't know.
But the way I look at tax, it's the same pocket. It's like we have a big family, a big pot of jollof rice. The pot is not going to grow. It just whose stomach is going to be fed.
No, but the expectation is also to have, because now there's a lot of digitalization that is going to come on board.
Yeah.
Companies are now expected to, there's something called e-invoicing.
Yes.
So companies are now expected to raise their invoices through a platform.
Through a platform,
So the
yeah.
tax authority can actually see
All your
all your
transactions.
transactions.
Yeah.
So if that happens, then it means you have more people on board.
Yes.
So to that extent, you're expected to have,
More compliance.
More compliance.
The size of the pot is going to grow
Exactly.
bigger.
It's going to grow bigger. So that's the expectation. And I think, listening to the chairman of the reforms committee, I think that's the expectation, that because compliance is going to increase, there should be more, because the aim is not to increase taxes or to, have the tax rates go up. But I feel that VAT is one of the highest
Source.
lines of revenue for
Yes.
for
Source of
government.
revenue
Yes.
for government. Yeah.
So if there's a hole with this inputs thing, then the compliance really has to be huge to plug that hole.
To plug that hole.
Yeah.
And I said that intentionally because the transaction, I go back to the transaction. Because at the end of the day, it's a society, and we are governed by either known or unknown societal rules. This transaction we spoke about, does this justify, or is it justifiable with the lower VAT collection from the government, technically?
Sorry, can you take that again?
So when I
Just
talk
so
about
clear.
the subsidy removal,
Yeah.
when I talk about the electricity cost increase,
Yeah.
when I talk
Yeah.
about all of those things,
Yeah.
and then on the other side, we talk about entrepreneurs, small businesses, multinationals are going to pay less VAT. So you give them a breather.
Well,
Is
technically,
the equation
because-
balanced?
yeah.
Is the equation getting more balanced?
Okay, I get what you mean. Like, is the government now giving
Is the
more?
equation getting more balanced? Yeah.
Somewhat, but from an individual perspective, it doesn't change. Maybe for businesses it does, because they are now able to recover more of the VAT that they incur. So that's fine from a business perspective. But for you and I, when we go to the restaurants, we still pay VAT.
Yes.
Anything we buy, because VAT really is borne by the final consumer. It
Yes.
should be borne by the
Should
final
be borne,
consumer.
yeah.
So that's why, companies, people should have the ability to recover the VAT that they have incurred, right, from the VAT that they collect. But for the final consumer, we have no way of recovering anything.
Yes,
So we
yes.
still pay our VAT.
Yes.
So from my perspective, it's no impact.
Yes.
But for businesses, absolutely.
And where I'm trying to go is for the low earners, there is something on the table. We spoke about it.
Yeah.
For the small businesses, less than 100 million revenue in a
Something
year,
on the table.
there's something on the table. Now, for the big sized company, through VAT reduction,
Yeah.
technically, there is something for them as well.
Absolutely.
You know, that's where I'm trying to establish.
Absolutely. And remember, they were going to increase the VAT.
Yes, to 12%. It was on the table.
It was on the table.
It wasn't passed.
It
Thank
didn't
God.
pass.
Thank God.
It didn't pass because, and I suspect that was a way to kind of try to manage the whole, that's the, this inputs
Was
VAT
gonna-
recovery was going to create, but that didn't pass. Of course, we're glad it didn't pass from our perspective because
From the consumer
yeah,
perspective.
because it's just going to increase costs for individuals, for consumers, for individuals, and inflation is already really high.
Yes.
So I also suspect it would have had an adverse implication on inflation. So I think it's probably a good thing if you ask me.
Not to pass that now,
that
with
was
already
at the time.
very high inflation, and this
Absolutely.
will definitely
Yeah.
pass into inflation
I
directly.
believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. But do you see a games theory happening over there? I give you a little bit, then I come back for more.
Well,
I'm sorry, I have this mindset of that's the way I look at tax. I give you
Yeah.
something, then I come back for more. So now I give you a breather with the way I'm going to manage my VAT.
Yeah.
You get a breather, but I might come back for my 12%.
Well, I think that's a possibility. But I know that those kind of conversations are never easy.
Of course.
There's a lot of should I say politics or politicking that will be involved in that, because even before VAT was increased to 7.5, I don't know if you were very much aware of goings on in the tax space.
Negotiations.
There was a big debate. I think there was probably even a strike, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
But
and
there
that's
wa-
where I'm going to next.
yeah, and that's just an additional 2.5 because
Yes, from
VAT
5
used
to
be 5 to
yes.
2.5.
Yes.
It was hard fought. So if it will now be increased to 12,
12, yeah. From 7.5.
I think that will be
That's a fuck.
that might be because I do remember when it was being increased, there was some fight. There was, I think it was reversed before ultimately it was now increased to 7.5. But even at 7.5, it's still one of the lowest.
And that's where
in
I'm
the world.
going to. That's where I'm going to. This is how the sellers sell the product. I said, first of all,
it's one of the lowest.
First of
Yeah.
all, what's the dial? First of all, the tax remit compared to GDP ratio is very low. Second is VAT
the
rate
lowest.
is one of the lowest, and those are true.
Yeah, they're
Those
facts.
are true.
They are factual
But this is not
statements.
the old truth. There is the truth, and there are buckets of truth,
truths.
and there's the old truth.
Yeah.
Because truth also is the cost of fuel compared to the average income of the salary.
I actually think
The cost of the food on the table.
Yeah.
The cost of a basket of grocery.
Yeah.
They call it in economics cost parity, something like that. If you need to compare all of those before you can make an informed decision.
Yeah.
When you just say 7.5%,
it doesn't
it's
show
low.
I
It's
understand.
low.
It doesn't show the whole story. It doesn't
Yes.
tell the whole story.
Yes.
They are factual statements, but they don't tell the whole story. So I do,
Bravo.
and for me, I think even the most critical or the most important piece of information when people make that kind of comparison is what is the level of income of people in Nigeria when you as compared to some of these jurisdictions. So if our minimum wage is 70,000, wow, which is, I don't know what that is in
$50.
US dollars.
Less than $50. This is what I'm
yeah.
trying to get to.
Exactly. So
It's
if,
less than $50.
yes,
And then you
So
talk about VAT.
in a whole month, $50, like that's just really poor, and but of course when making those comparison around, the VAT rate in Nigeria 7.5 is low, average in most jurisdictions about 15, so why don't we move up to 12? But you have to say, what's the ability of the average worker, the average consumer in Nigeria to purchase what do the average Nigerian
Purchasing
have
power.
what do the average Nigerian have to contend with in terms of transportation in some of these
Surviving daily
jurisdictions?
life. Yeah.
There are
Basic available.
yeah, there are amenities,
Transportation, you can go with
transportation,
$1.
infrastructure.
You know,
You can get your bus pass
you
for
can
a
get
day.
by easily. You can get a meal for 1.9.
Yeah.
You know,
There's that. There's road network. All those things are available. They are not necessarily readily available here. So for me, from that point of view, as we begin to enhance our infrastructure, then we can begin to have conversations around, increasing some of these things. And also as the income levels of people improve generally in the country, then
it's fair.
we can begin to have those conversations. But at this time, I also don't think increasing, things like,
VAT.
VAT and things
The
like that
timing is not right.
would be fair. I don't think so, because people are truly struggling.
Yes. I think we share the same mindset on that. And then I'll go to more functional discourse now. Still on tax,
Yeah.
but more functional.
Okay.
From your experience, what is the number one true measure of a efficient tax system? How do you gauge if this tax system is optimum for this jurisdiction, as an example, from your experience?
Well, from my experience, how you gain, how you determine whether,
yeah.
the tax system is optimum. One, you want to be sure that awareness, first of all. Secondly, use of technology. Because a situation where you don't necessarily have to maybe go and file your returns, where
Yeah.
the tax authority writes to you to say, oh, this is we've seen your returns, you have an excess, we refund you. I go to, an example.
Yes.
My sister used to live in the UK, and she showed
Okay.
me
Our
her letter
tax,
from
yes.
the
Government.
HM Revenue
Yes.
and Custom, and they had written that, for
last year,
you
you
have
overpaid.
an excess, so here's your check, or maybe they will apply it as a credit. I'm like, oh wow, interesting, And I also recall in some years back, whenever I visit the UK, I'll usually
Yes.
process my VAT refund because
Yes.
I'm exporting the items
Yes.
and VAT.
Yes.
Exported items are
Are
really
exempted
exempt.
from tax.
And I'm like, we don't we don't have, even though
Provisions.
in our law, the law actually also exempts exports,
But
but we don't have the mechanism to process that
at the personal
refund.
level,
Yes,
at the big
personal-
company
yes.
level, they are able to do it.
They should be able
There's
to
a
do
window.
it when they export.
It's called something like EGG. You're able to.
No, that's export expansion grant. That's
okay,
a grant.
different. That's a
EEG,
grant. Yes,
that's a
you're
grant.
right.
Yeah, but for people that export, when you pay your duty, I guess you won't pay VAT on that. I
You
haven't
shouldn't
exported. You
by
shouldn't.
legislation.
You shouldn't, because it's there by legislation. But that's mechanism of, people come here, they buy items, and they're going.
They should be
then
able to
process-
take their VAT back.
So I think those are some of the things that, once we begin to mature, I think it will show, that, the tax system is appropriate. And I also feel like now that we're now infusing technology, we may begin to see that, benefit. We begin to see changes in terms of behavior, and also some of the things that we hope to see in our own tax framework, because the mindset right now for the average taxman is, when they come for audit, they're just looking for
Holes.
holes. They
Yeah.
want to see
How to bankrupt
how
me.
to how to try to come up with liabilities, huge
Yes.
liabilities.
On me. Yeah.
Perhaps they also have targets in their offices. Perhaps there's a motivation to just want to come up with liabilities. But if there's technology and you can see on your system or from the make the whatever
It's
software
tied.
that
you can see all my
and you
transactions,
can
all
tie
my
it.
income, all my
So,
expenses.
so really, there's
all
really no need to
documented.
audit. So maybe
Yes.
we then move to risk-based audit to say, okay, maybe this kind of
Take a
industry
sample.
is more risky. Then
Yes,
maybe let's
yeah.
take a look at this, or let's just do a sample of this and that. And for me, that's when I begin to see that, then I'll begin to be more comfortable and confident that, oh yes, indeed, now we're maturing, and the system, actually works.
I agree with you, especially with your example. It's very hard to tax coming back when you overpay. The answer I was looking for is trust. If there is trust, then people, even if
Yeah, but those things would breed trust.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is number one major. First, I pay because I get the benefit.
Yeah.
And I have trust that if I overpay, I'm going to get my returns back without any hassle.
Yeah.
And this for me is very important because then people are not only willing but happy.
Absolutely.
Happy to pay.
Yeah.
And I hope that at some point we're going to mature to the level where you can see things like you buy things locally and then you can export and you can get your tax return
Absolutely.
easily.
Absolutely.
We not only make the legislation, but we create a mechanism
Absolutely.
that allows this for you to realize this benefit.
Absolutely.
And this is where trust comes.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, it's a society. We are human beings. Trust is the currency.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And that's what I was thinking. And how do you see in the nearest future how the tax system is going to go? This tax journey, how do you see, especially under the current administration, what is your short-term or mid to short-term anticipation when it comes to overall tax system?
Well, I feel in the short term, the new legislation will take effect in January.
Yeah.
I think in the short term there will be some small, maybe teething issues. People trying to understand the new legislation.
Master the new act.
New circulars will come out. There'll be
Yeah.
guidance.
Yeah.
There'll be some additional provisions. Some, seminars, updates. This is the
Yes.
intention, spirit of
Yes.
the law.
Yes.
I use your phrase.
Yes.
And I think, to the medium term, we'll come to the realization that things have changed. There'll be more technology because right now they've been test running technology with the big companies. I believe companies with, I think, maybe 5 billion or 10 billion and above or something. The big, like telecoms,
Yes.
the
Yes.
banks, so they've been test running that. That will be deployed to many more businesses
Yes.
as we go along. So you have a situation where, even medium-sized businesses also would have to, do their invoices through that system, which then, in a sense, can have like you can have some kind of what we call revenue assurance. So there won't be stories around, oh, you're depressing your revenue, or you're not accounting for this. So there will be, I see into the medium to long term, that's, as we begin to infuse technology, maybe AI,
Yeah.
maybe AI,
Hopefully.
things there will be less conflicts in terms of resolving, audit issue.
Yeah.
And hopefully there can also be more trust, because at the end of the day, even if we have a good system, we have things in place, people ultimately have no choice but to pay their taxes. But when those taxes are not being put to good use,
We have a bit of a problem.
then there will be a
Societal
problem.
Yeah.
Because then there's no motivation to comply if we can't see where you put the tax revenues to. And also you have to have a tax system that encourages investments.
Yes.
So because we need it
Yes.
presently, so there has to also be constant looking at the tax laws and regulations to ensure that it motivates investments. So I think those are the things that I think I expect to see in the medium to long term, and hopefully the trust agenda is enhanced, because really everything,
backbone.
Everything still falls on trust.
It's the backbone.
Especially if you want voluntary compliance.
Yes.
Even in countries where things are properly done, people are not necessarily, like in the UK. When I went to the UK last summer, there were still complaints about taxes because
Yes.
things are
Yes.
changing.
Yes.
But I tell you, Samuel, when I had my secondment in
Okay.
the Netherlands,
Okay.
and I tell this experience to people. I had a roommate in the office that was sharing an
Yeah.
office with me,
Shared space. Yeah.
and I asked, what's your rate in the Netherlands? Personal income. And she told me,
You were
I
shocked.
can't remember, I think it was about 45%
45%.
at the time.
I remember about 45%.
I think it was about 45.
In Netherlands, in the UK, and in Northern Europe, it's between
So-
45 and 50%.
45 or maybe close to 50. And I was like, oh my God, you're working for the
Astronomical,
government. That's
yeah,
astronomical.
yeah.
And she was like, oh, yeah,
But-
but she said, look out the window. I looked
Yes.
out. She said, do you like the roads? I said,
Yes.
yes. She said, when you were coming, how did you come? I said, oh, I took the train. They said,
Train.
okay.
It works.
She said, my parents are old. I can't remember how old our parents were at the time. But the government take care of our
Takes
parents.
care of them.
If I
Pension
don't-
is easy
If I
for
don't
them.
pay my taxes, how would the government have
Yes.
the funds to do
Free
this?
education,
Honestly,
free medical.
I couldn't speak.
Yes.
I couldn't say anything.
Yes.
I just said, oh. My response was just, oh.
Yes.
And that was the response. And
Yes.
I think that's the level that we need to get to.
Yes.
Where people confidently will tell you, look, I have to pay this tax so that government can't do this. Government will have the ability. Because really, for me, that moment was profound for me.
Yes.
Because I don't think I've ever met anyone in my own country that's
Will be
you
happy.
know, that's very happy to,
Yes.
and what's the highest band in Nigeria? I know at
24% now.
No, it's now 25.
25.
No, presently, sorry, you're right.
24.
Current is
Yes.
24 now, but
Yes.
the new
Now
one
it's
is
going to go
25.
25. Yes.
And I'm saying at 24, people are still, finding ways to, and people are not happy to, pay that. But hopefully we can get to that level where even at 30 or 35, people.
My
We're
personal
happy to.
reflection as you speak is the example you gave is very good. It's very real, and it's very
Real
good.
life.
If
I didn't
I would,
form-
if
this
I
was
would
real.
have this conversation from the beginning again, I would say it's about trust management. It's not about
Yeah.
tax reform
Yeah.
or tax management or tax planning. It's about trust management and trust planning. Because if I pay half of my income as tax and I don't have to pay medical bills, my pension is going to be taken care of, my parents are going to take care of, my kids are going to be in school. My transportation is well taken care of. Except I want luxury.
Yeah. Maybe there's a motivation.
It's a
to
fair
do that.
deal.
Yeah.
It's a fair deal. Then we are talking here about trust management, and that's where I hope we can mature up to.
Absolutely.
Because then if my transaction analogy,
Yeah.
what you give and what you take,
Yeah.
if it's balanced, then people are more obliged.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to pay less in driving compliance.
Yeah.
In catching.
Absolutely.
In catching, which is a lot of work.
Yeah.
We have a whole office driving this,
Yeah.
as an example.
Absolutely.
And you drive transparency through digitalization, e-invoicing.
Absolutely.
And people are, okay, I will pay my tax because I know I'm going to get something back,
Absolutely.
And you drive fairness, trust and fairness. And these are my reflections during this long conversation that if I will have again from the beginning, I will call it trust, trust management and fairness
Yeah,
on that tax.
absolutely.
Because these are the bedrock
Absolutely.
that drive the tax system. These are the things that make it work or break it.
Absolutely.
Indeed, I want to say thank you to you, Dio. It's been amazing fun talking
you
to
so
you.
much.
Quite educational,
Thank you so much.
enlightening, eye-opening. Definitely, you are not a subject matter expert for fun.
Thank
You definitely know your stuff, and I've learned a lot from you, and I'm sure our audiences will feel the same. So thank you for that. But I'm passionate about small businesses.
Yeah.
So as we round up the session, if you have just one advice for small business owners, what should they focus on in the new tax reform?
Well, I would say, first of all, they need to be aware.
Yes.
So need to really to see, how it impacts them.
Yes.
But more importantly is to ensure that they keep proper records. There is a risk that because of the infusion of technology and everything now, if maybe there's a linkage between bank accounts and the business, there might be discrepancy around whether you're truly a small business. Because not every money that comes into your accounts is revenue.
It's revenue.
It can be a
I
loan.
have lots of friends in this problem today.
So it's really proper record keeping
Proper record
to
keeping.
ensure that, if there are conflicts or disputes, it can be easily resolved. Part of the issues that small businesses have always had is lack of record keeping.
Wow.
I've been in discussions with a lot of friends, even just yesterday, talking to a friend, and part of his issue is they just commingle us their personal transactions, business, everything, together. So, and some don't even have
This record.
records, like they don't even have accounts. Because you're a small business doesn't mean you don't need to have a small basic financial statements, because that's the beginning of every conversation. So where is your record? what's your revenue, what's your profits,
That's your cost.
without any, what's your cost? Yeah, obviously it's the costs less revenue that'll give you your profits. Without any record, then it's difficult to then justify,
To have a conversation.
to have a conversation.
Then it becomes my view versus your view.
Yeah, so you then
I
come up-
feel or you think.
which is what's in tax called best of judgments.
Yes.
So the taxman just comes with the best of judgments.
I make
so,
my call.
I would say if there's anything, small businesses leave this session with, it will be, please record-keeping, no matter how little.
Yeah.
Maybe if there are, I believe there will be software that can do that.
Yes.
Or just engage a small accountant that just comes in once a month,
Once a week, once a
or
month.
once a week,
does
keep your
the stuff,
record,
yeah.
do it, and you can see where you are. It also keeps you very accountable.
Yes.
So you can see, okay, this is how I'm growing. You can also see how your trajectory,
Yes, absolutely.
from a business perspective. So that would
Also,
be,
you can anticipate how much tax you need to pay at the end of the
yeah,
year.
you can anticipate
And make
as
sure you are
grow.
making provisions now
Absolutely
for it, and not
as you
doing
grow.
Owambe and Omble and everything.
Absolutely.
Spend your tax at the end of the year. You
Absolutely.
try to avoid, and then you get into
Absolutely.
trouble.
Absolutely.
So proper accounting, driving visibility, clarity from weekly basis, monthly basis,
Absolutely.
saves a lot of headache at the end of the year.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Dayo.
Thank
Really amazing talking to you. Like I said, it's been enlightening even for me, and I'm sure for most of our audience.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking the time to join us, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you, Samuel.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Cheers.